some Trump supporters have arrived at the third stage of copium after losing the 2020 election to Joe Biden. So now, first, of course, was denial that he lost, blaming it on Hugo Chavez, voter fraud, and other things that there's absolutely no proof of. All right, so some Trump supporters are still stuck on stage one, the denial. Some of them, like Trump, kind of vacillate between, stage 2 and 1 and 3, and he's kind of going back and forth. But generally, a lot of people have started to arrive at stage 3, and that's bargaining. Okay, and that brings me to Randy Quaid. Now, Randy Quaid. Why am I talking about Randy Quaid? He's like kind of a washed-up actor. I haven't heard of any movies that he's been in, but none of that really matters because he's tweeting out ridiculous things. So now, here's what he said. Back on November 20th, that was on Friday, we've lost confidence in the system that elects our leaders. 79 million Americans believe the election was rigged, the results fraudulent. We need an in-person, only paper ballot revote. Only, especially in the states where flagrant irregularities have occurred. No accuracy, no democracy. Oh, now look, I'm a proponent of hand-counted paper ballots, but I don't necessarily think that we need to redo the whole thing. Okay, so I'm just saying. So let me break this down piece by piece because why the hell not? Might as well. So the big question here is, where are you getting your numbers, dude? 79 million Americans believe the election was rigged. No, I'm pretty sure that has to do with the percentage of Trump supporters, Trump voters or Republican voters that believe that the election was unfair, right? That it was fraudulent, it was rigged. That's a really high number of Trump voters. That is super high. That's the only thing I can think of because other than that, I mean, 79 million people actually voted for Joe Biden. 73 million voted for Trump. Okay. How can more people who voted believe that the election was rigged? That doesn't make any sense. It's MAGA math. And of course it doesn't make sense. But okay. 79%. I think that's where the number comes from. I think we can all agree on that, essentially. Okay. Now, the whole premise here is that a lot of Trump voters think that the election was rigged and that they don't trust it. Well, okay, well, let's examine why, because there's, I think, a lot of different reasons. Why did he lose, for one? Well, it's because he's unpopular. I mean, he's never broke 50%. So he's done very unpopular things, not a populist. He's not a right-wing populist, certainly not a left-wing populist. He's not a populist at all. Now, he kind of ran as a sort of populist, but not really. Oh, I'm the outsider. I'm the anti-establishment, except that I gave the establishment trillions of dollars in tax cuts. And I gave corporations everything they wanted. Look at me. I'm such an outsider. Bullshit. Total bullshit. Look, instead of doing the things that the majority of the American people wanted, like, for example, giving people health care, single payer, right? I remember when Donald Trump talked about how, this was before he was president, how single payer was actually a good thing. And how if we were to have like a single payer Medicare for all healthcare system, then it would be so much better in this country. Well, why don't you do that? That's because you don't really care about it, don't actually believe in it. You just said things that were popular. And if we look at the healthcare system that you pushed and tried to get passed, it was disastrous, deeply, deeply unpopular. It made Obamacare look good. That's bad. Because again, the ACA, it's got a lot of problems. What we need is actually to go to a Medicare for all single payer healthcare system that would actually fulfill the promise of universal healthcare. So again, did he even lower prescription drug prices? Absolutely not. He golfed and he bitched on Twitter. That's what he did the whole time, basically. So it turns out that's not exactly popular with the majority of Americans. Even some of his supporters were saying, hey, get off Twitter. and go actually do something. But really, Trump supporters, again, why he lost is this: he just wasn't a popular president. He wasn't a good president at all. And he had people against him massively. And so, look, Trump supporters don't seem to understand that. He won by fluke. It was lightning in a bottle. It was anger against the establishment and Hillary Clinton being a super unpopular Democrat. Also, I should say that COVID-19 gets MVP of the year. All right? MVP of the year. Why? Well, because I think that Joe Biden would have barely lost this election had it not been for COVID-19. And I think that was one of the big things. Trump's response to COVID was a complete and utter disaster. And so, that said, everything was looking pretty decent for Donald Trump. Joe Biden, not exactly the most exciting or best candidate that I've ever seen on the Democratic side. And so I was actually forecasting that Joe Biden would lose to Donald Trump. Again, you had situations that came up, COVID-19, for example, the recession, Donald Trump's response to it, absolute disaster for his campaign, and he sunk himself. He did what the establishment wanted him to do back in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. Hung himself, basically, with his own rope. Hung himself on his own petard, essentially. And so the reason that Donald Trump supporters now don't trust the election is, again, there's a lot of different factors here. For one, they got lied to over and over by their media. Their media said, oh, there's no way that Donald Trump could ever lose. He's the most popular president. He's the best president there's ever been. Well, look, you can have the opinion that he was the best president you've ever had, but if the polls do not back that up, and if he's constantly underwater, then you could say he's not exactly popular, and therefore a lot of people don't agree with the fact that he's the best president ever. So they're lying. They're lying to their own supporters. You had Fox News, you had OAN, you had Breitbart, and even had their own leadership that was lying about how popular Donald Trump is and how good of a chance he actually had at winning this election as a result of COVID. They live in an alternate media bubble, right? And they don't trust anything from mainstream press. And I got issues with mainstream press. Don't get me wrong about that, okay? Their opinions about progressive policies, such as Medicare for All, are not in line with the majority of voters, okay? And so they've got a real problem. They're trying to discourage people away from progressive policies. Why? Because they have a corporate establishment bias. They want to keep things kind of the status quo. And so with Joe Biden, we have a return to the status quo. And that said, mainstream press is not in crazy land. They're not making up alternative facts. All right? They're basically, again, out there saying, we should stay with the status quo. Here's why Medicare for All bad. Here's why Bernie Sanders bad. Here's why progressives bad. Let's stay with the status quo because we made millions of dollars off of it. But the point is, just because 79% of Trump supporters believe in something, believe that something is true, does not make it true, because you actually have to have evidence. And that evidence is just not there. It's not there. I mean, the only fraud that was found so far, because there was a Republican out there that was like, okay, I'm going to give you $1 million to find fraud. Well, John Fetterman found it. That was reported by Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. He found 2 cases of voter fraud, both by Trump voters. Oops. No evidence of widespread voter fraud, but you certainly have a couple of instances of Trump voters, and we've seen this in 2016 as well, of Trump voters like doing voter fraud themselves. Ironic. Very ironic. So, again, Trump supporters being lied to about this. Every case so far has been thrown out of court. It's all essentially copium at this point. They're coping with this. And the final insanity of this tweet is asking for a hand recount for an entire election in person during the worst outbreak of COVID-19 that we have had in this country. Are you mental? Oh, wait, look who I'm asking. Randy freaking Quaid. But the whole purpose of that specifically is saying, well, if we do a recount of the election, or not a recount, but a redo, if we just redo the whole thing because we don't like this result, their thinking is, well, yeah, the liberals aren't going to come out because of COVID-19. If we can't do mail-in ballots, then they're all going to be forced to stand in person. And then Republican voter suppression tactics will actually work this time. Yeah, well, that's not how we do things. We're not going to do a recount of an election where they didn't find fraud. Or, I'm sorry, not even a recount, a redo of the election. I keep saying recount. We're not going to do a redo of an entire election just because a few people, Republicans, who are completely misinformed with disinformation, are uncomfortable with the result. They don't like the result. My guy lost. I can't believe my guy lost. Why? We should redo the whole thing. You want to take your ball and go home. No, they want to completely redo the entire game. This is like the equivalent of flipping a chessboard over. I mean, sorry, we're not going to do that. We can't do a redo of this entire election. Sorry, not happening. And look, here's the other thing. They say, well, vote by mail. So unfair. I mean, how dare all these Biden voters vote by mail? Well, Biden didn't tell his voters to not vote by mail. Donald Trump did. So, yeah, he's asking for a mulligan. That's what he's doing. It's a mulligan. Well, you don't get a mulligan on the election. Sorry. That said, widespread voter fraud, not proven in court. There's no facts behind it. If so, they would have presented that evidence in the numerous court cases that they brought alleging voter fraud. But that didn't stop Donald Trump from retweeting this garbage in order to keep this clown coup going. Here's Trump retweeting that tweet saying, "Are you listening, Republicans?" Should they? Why should they? All Randy Quaid is doing is posting conspiracy cope theories. And that's it. Here's what he said on November 21st. "I just see Americans rolling up for this election fraud. Do you?" Yeah, I mean, I don't see most Americans rolling over and wanting to disenfranchise the votes of millions of people in Democratic cities, primarily black and brown. These are Biden voters that, would be disenfranchised based on nothing more than hearsay and conspiracy theories. That's not what you meant. My bad. Of course. In fact, here's more. He said the less rush to complete their heist of this election, that's projection, is the end game for them. It started with the theater of the fake impeachment. Now they want to jam through the certification of their election fraud, no evidence, calling Biden president-elect, because he is, when legally he isn't. No, he is. That's fake news. In their twisted minds, the election is over, because it is. And they want their fraud certified like yesterday, because it should have been. Election fraud, Trump, Pence, 2020. And here, this really encapsulates unfortunately, a lot of what Republicans think, these Trump supporters. 12 more years of Trump, then Pence will wipe the earth of the leftist scourge. Now, I think what he meant by the 12 years is 4 more years of Trump and then 8 of Pence. 12 years. The math turns out. But that's insane. You're getting into dangerous stuff, okay? Literally advocating for wiping the leftist scourge off the face of the earth. That is a call for violence. The guy's lost it. Oh, well, to be fair, I am familiar with Randy Quaid never really having it, at least not for some time, seeing some of the other stories about him in the past. But anyway, you go through his Twitter feed, and it's just one insane thing after another. But understand, though, this is exactly the kind of mentality that we're facing. Democratic Party, Joe Biden, I'm not unifying this. There's just no way in hell. Stop asking me to unify. And the way that the reason that I bring that up is because Joe Biden keeps putting out these messages. Oh, we must heal the divide in this nation by coming together and embracing the unity. No, I'm not unifying with that. That wants to kill me. Okay, that wants to kill my friends. That wants to kill my family. I'm not unifying with that bullshit. All right? And so, no, I'm not interested. They want us either dead or disenfranchised. There's a significant divide between, and I'm not saying all Republicans are like that, but there's a significant amount of Trump voters that do feel that way. That's not good. Okay, I'm not interested. This isn't like a difference. Like, oh, we differ on tax policy. Like, I think we should have a slightly higher tax on rich people and then corporations. And they're like, oh no, that will make it so that business will not invest as much. Blah blah blah. Right? I think this regulation is good. Well, I think this regulation is not good. We should try to find a compromise. No, we're not having this discussion. They're literally having a discussion of, are black people human? And should trans people be murdered? No, I'm not going to have that conversation. That's not a worthy conversation to have. These people are monstrous if you believe in that stuff. And I'm not going to unify with that. Not interested whatsoever. Okay, they are a cult. This is cultist behavior. They don't care about facts. And here's the thing. Here's why people love Trump so much, right? This guy who's never worked a day in his life at a real, at a job where you have to go in and you have to actually work 8 hours, busting your ass. This guy is a New York socialite who literally got handed all of his money. He has nothing in common with you. But the reason that you like him so much is because guess what? They allow you to be, the worst version of yourself. And that's really it. They allow you to be the worst version of yourself. They allow you to openly hate Muslims, gay people, trans people. They allow you to hate whoever the hell you want to hate without any sort of consequence. Go ahead. Be the shittiest version of you that you can be. Trump 2020. That's what it's about. They don't care about facts because all Trump allows them to do is embrace their feelings. And it turns out their feelings are pretty shitty. They don't like democracy. Again, I've heard them say, I want a dictatorship as long as it's under Donald Trump. And of course, it would be a dictatorship they'd be okay with because they would be on top of the social order. They'd be on top of the blacks. They'd be on top of the, poor, the non-Christians, the Muslims. That's what they stand for. Just to be on top of someone else. To keep others down. That's what they stand for, whether they admit it or not. I mean, whether they realize it or not, supporting Donald Trump is saying that all the bad stuff that he does and stands for is not a deal breaker as long as I have some sort of material benefit to my life, or if I can feel like I'm on top and better than someone else. It is selfishness, and we have learned that 79% of Republicans are okay with that. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.